This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Nigeria's Lagos governor says one dead after Tuesday's deadly clashes between protesters and security forces. Rwanda genocide suspect Felicien Kabuga to be transferred to The Hague for medical assessment ahead of trial. And the latest from Europe as daily coronavirus cases there hit 150,000. This is Africa Live. A warm welcome. I am Penina Karibe, and joining us with a sneak peek of what's ahead in business news is Uche.
Thanks, Penina. And here's a look at what's coming up later on Africa Live Bits. Egypt is set to build its $29 billion nuclear power plant in 2021. And streaming giant Netflix is on a mission to broadcast more African-made content as well as work with telecom operators. Of course, more on that coming up within the program. For now, it is back to Penina.
Thank you, Uche. And we begin tonight in Nigeria, where the governor of Lagos has said authorities are investigating the death of one person who suffered blunt trauma to the head during protests on Tuesday. Some protesters have broken a round-the-clock curfew imposed on Tuesday after soldiers were accused of opening fire on Nigerians protesting against police brutality in Lagos. The Lagos State Governor, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, told a news conference that at least 25 people were wounded. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres on Wednesday called for security forces to act at all times with maximum restraint. He also called on protesters to demonstrate peacefully and to refrain from violence. Thousands of Nigerians have demonstrated nationwide for nearly 2 weeks against the special anti-robbery squad. The squad has been accused of harassment, torture and murder for years. The unit was disbanded early this month, but protests persist, calling for broader law enforcement reforms. Alleged Rwandan genocide financier Felicien Kabuga is to be temporarily transferred to The Hague for a medical assessment. That's according to the UN tribunal in charge of his case. Kabuga was previously expected to stand trial at the Mechanism for International Criminal Tribunal based in Arusha, Tanzania. He is charged with genocide and crimes against humanity over his alleged role in the 1994 Rwanda genocide. Kabuga's lawyers asked that he be transferred to the Dutch city instead of Arusha, saying long-haul air travel would pose a health risk to the 85-year-old businessman because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Kabuga was arrested near Paris in May after 25 years on the run. Burundi's ex-president Pierre Buyoya said Wednesday that he rejected a life sentence he received in absentia this week. He was sentenced over the 1993 assassination of his successor. Buyoya dismissed the case as politically motivated. According to a court ruling, Buyoya was convicted for an attack against a then head of state, President Melchior Ndadaye, who was overthrown during a coup that plunged the country into civil war. 18 high-ranking military officials and civilians who were close to Buyoya received the same sentence. In November 2018, Burundi issued an international arrest warrant against Buyoya, which he denounced. Buyoya is currently the African Union's representative in Mali. Sudanese authorities have welcomed a signal by U.S. President Donald Trump to remove the country from the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism. The removal was on condition that Sudan honor its pledge to pay $335 million to American victims of the 1998 twin terror attacks on the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. Sudan on Tuesday announced that it had transferred the funds. The terrorism listing has been a major hurdle for Sudan to access foreign financing and debt relief. Decades of sanctions have hampered efforts by Sudan's transitional government to revive the economy. Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok hailed the development as a big win for Sudan.
This decision will allow us to manage the economy with a better environment and totally new effective mechanisms. Removing Sudan from the terror list will open the door widely for Sudan to legitimately return to the international community.
We have been working thoroughly for a whole year, the cabinet, as well as experts, to achieve this goal for Sudan to return back to its right legitimate position and for the Sudanese people to return to their life.
The Sudanese people have also welcomed the U.S. intention to remove the North African country from its list of state sponsors of terrorism. Let's hear what they had to say.
Removing Sudan from the terrorist list will add a lot to Sudan and the Sudanese people. It will pave way for Sudan to be relieved of its debts, which Sudan suffered for the last 20 years, and will open the door for mutual interest relation between the U.S., which is considered a world power, and Sudan, and also will open relations with the rest of the world.
I am among the Sudanese citizens who feel that this is a very important step to be able to bring companies to invest in Sudan. Most of the international companies couldn't work in Sudan for fear of facing sanctions.
And still in Sudan, the International Criminal Court says former Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir must face justice without further delay. Bashir and 3 other suspects are accused of alleged war crimes, genocide and crimes against humanity. The conflict in Darfur that escalated in 2003 has displaced over 2 million people. Bashir was removed from office in April last year following months of protest. He has been in jail in Khartoum since his ouster. The ICC Chief Prosecutor Fatou Bensouda said options for prosecution could include a trial in Sudan and a hybrid tribunal.
The ICC has outstanding arrest warrants against Mr. Omar al-Bashir, Mr. Ahmed Haroun, Mr. Abdel Rahim Mohammed Hussein, and Mr. Abdallah Banda Abakar Nourain. And these suspects are still wanted for the atrocity crimes listed in their ICC warrants of arrest. They must all face justice without further delay. I am encouraged by the frank and open and constructive exchanges we have had. I particularly welcome the assurances of support and cooperation expressed to me by the authorities during this visit, including from His Excellency Prime Minister Hamdok. This first historic visit to Khartoum, after more than a decade, provided an opportunity for Sudan's transitional government to demonstrate its commitment to justice, to accountability, and to the rule of law.
Daily coronavirus infections across Europe have exceeded 150,000. Countries are toughening up restrictions to flatten the curve. Ireland is entering national lockdown, the first European country to do so. From midnight today, the entire population is being asked to stay home for 6 weeks. France, Germany and Italy are implementing nightly curfews in regions with high infection rates. Bars and restaurants have been ordered to shut. And in the UK, which has Europe's highest death toll, Wales will enter a strict lockdown from Friday, while England has rolled out a 3-tier strategy of regional measures to avoid a national lockdown. In Italy, new infections are growing at the fastest rate in Milan, Lombardy's capital and economic hub. The government has implemented a raft of new measures to tighten restrictions since Monday. CGTN's Alex Fraser is keeping an eye on how people are reacting to the new rules.
The second wave of COVID-19 has arrived in Italy. These people are waiting outside one of Milan's main train stations to take a free test. In the past week, Italy has recorded almost 70,000 new cases. Just like in March, cases are accelerating faster in the Lombardy region than anywhere else in the country. 3 days ago, Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte announced new national measures to try to slow infections. Bars and restaurants must close by midnight, with table service only after 6 p.m. Local mayors also have the power to close public areas. The two worst affected regions, Campania and Lombardy, have taken that further and imposed a total curfew from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. People must stay in their homes. Here in Lombardy, that will come into force on Thursday evening. For many businesses, the return of tighter restrictions 6 months on from the national lockdown are devastating. Malik Merlex is closing his cafe early. He says the new restrictions have made it unviable to stay open for the evening.
The fact that customers prefer to sit at the table. I have a small place, so theoretically, I cannot sit many people. so it's problematic for me. I prefer to close shop and go home, not to get fined or other things. But it's not just that. People are now afraid even to come in.
The Navili Canal is at the centre of Milan's nighttime economy. Many bar owners here say customer numbers have already dropped by 50% and they expect things to get worse.
The curfew from 11 to 5 means there's no sense for us to stay open. It's not really worth it. To open at 6 and close at 10? 4 hours of work? Yes, it's a grave pandemic and we have to control it, but we can't starve to death.
It's the same question being asked across Europe this winter. How to stop spiralling infections and hospitalizations without the second wave economic fallout hitting an already jaded population. Alex Fraser, CGTN, Milan.
Tunisia has launched a disinfection campaign as deaths from coronavirus infections climb past 700. The large-scale campaign involves several ministries, disinfection specialists and the police force. Adnet Shawashi has the details.
The disinfection campaign started at night when the streets and public buildings were empty. The governor of Tunis noted that experts are in charge of sterilizing and purifying all streets and public facilities.
The large-scale disinfection campaign will continue in all public spaces, public administration and public transports, schools, universities and all facilities. This is a shared responsibility between all stakeholders. We provide the logistical and human means to counter the spread of the virus.
The mayor of Tunis revealed that many civil servants have tested positive for COVID-19. Suad Abderrahim explained that the campaign aims to create a healthy and safe environment for Tunisian citizens.
The campaign targets the clusters of infections in the Grand Tunis district. Dozens of municipalities are involved to limit the spread of coronavirus. Some municipalities were shut down to conduct disinfection operations. The number of victims is on the rise. We must be careful.
The Tunisian police are helping to enforce an ongoing curfew to combat the spread of the virus. Some police officers are issuing a verbal or written warning, while others have seized dozens of vehicles. Many people were fined or arrested for ignoring the curfew in place from 9 p.m. until 5 a.m.
Respecting the curfew is necessary in order to support the state effort in fighting the coronavirus pandemic. We help the people who cannot go home on time while we reprimand those who drive without an authorization or a real reason.
Dozens of trucks were still spraying the streets at sunrise. Millions of residents woke up to a disinfected city. According to the National Observatory of New and Emerging Diseases, Tunisia records an average of 24 fatalities per day, while the positivity rate of the tests is over 30%. In cooperation with the Interior and Health Ministries, the governors of 14 regions have mobilized all resources and capabilities to guarantee the success of the disinfection campaign. The cleaning program will be extended to all regions across the country. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
The UN's Libya envoy is optimistic on ceasefire talks between Libya's warring factions. Speaking at a news conference, Stephanie Williams said the two sides had agreed to maintain the current state of calm on the front lines and avoid any military escalation. CGTN's Tuli Shabalala has more.
Over the past 5 years, Libya has been engulfed in conflict. The country is split between the internationally recognized government of National Accord based in the capital Tripoli and forces loyal to Khalifa Haftar based in the east of the country. Representatives from the GNA and Haftar's Libyan National Army have been meeting for talks in Geneva. The United Nations envoy to Libya is mediating the talks and hopes they will lead to a lasting ceasefire.
What I am really impressed by is the fact that they're doing this themselves. These are Libyan solutions. You know, the civil aviation authorities are coordinating amongst themselves, you know, to launch the flights. They're taking the necessary measures on their own, and I think that is really the most optimistic and positive development that I have seen. After all, it's their country, and Libya is for Libyans. And that is why I continue to be very optimistic that the parties here are going to reach a more lasting and permanent ceasefire.
The two sides agreed on a number of key issues.
The two sides also agreed to support and continue the current state of calm on the front lines and to avoid any military escalation.
The first flights between Tripoli and the main eastern city of Benghazi are expected to resume this week, and the sides had agreed to make progress on an exchange of detainees. The UN envoy to Libya, though, has denounced continuing foreign interference in the country.
The degree of foreign intervention and foreign interference in Libya is unacceptable. These countries need to take their hands off of Libya. We need to transform negative external interference into positive assistance for the Libyan people as they come together, as they unify their institutions, and as they build a secure, stable, and prosperous future.
Both the GNA and LNA say they want to support and continue the current state of calm on the front lines and avoid any military escalation. A political dialogue in Tunisia next month is set to follow these talks in Geneva. Thuli Shabalala, CGTN.
You're watching Africa Live. Let's take our first break this hour coming up. Zimbabwe's education minister directs schools to roll out online lessons amid an ongoing teacher strike. And South African schools maintain strict social distancing rules in classrooms, corridors, and on the playing field to protect children.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis,
Syria,
Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Zimbabwe's education minister has directed schools to roll out online lessons amid an ongoing teachers' strike. But there are concerns that online learning may not be as effective as face-to-face teaching. Farai Makutuya reports.
Tembo Nashema Kumborenga is unhappy. She had to bring her daughter back home from boarding school because there are no teachers.
They spent the last 3 weeks doing nothing. They were just watching videos and playing all day.
As the stalemate over teachers' pay continues and with exams looming, parents are worried, but the government insists the show must go on.
The learning does not stop, has not stopped, and it is continuing. We are still on our online platforms. We're still having the radio lessons. We have had to distribute even physical copies and modules of self-study guides for those who did not have perhaps radio reception.
But not everyone is sold on the effectiveness of online learning.
When a student gets some of their answers incorrect, They need an explanation of where they went wrong, so the teacher needs to be there in person to do that. Also, my child might be on the phone texting their friends or watching videos instead of doing schoolwork. Lastly, I may not always have money to buy the data needed.
However, the school owner says there are appropriate technologies to cater for everyone.
I believe that WhatsApp can work in the rural areas, even deep in some of the underprivileged societies. They have that small phone. It's possible. So I don't think that really WhatsApp is a setup for the urban areas.
He's been using WhatsApp since schools were closed and intends to continue post-COVID-19.
I believe that as we move forward, I would not be running a full-time school myself. I would run or maybe a distance learning school where learners may come to school. I may need them maybe 2 days a week, and then 3 days they are doing online learning. It cuts on cost of transport, reduce pressure on our facilities.
Thousands of teachers have not reported for duty since the resumption of schools, citing financial incapacitation and want their salaries increased to counter soaring inflation. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
School playgrounds in South Africa have become a lot quieter, with the country still under a partial lockdown. COVID-19 infection rates have been relatively low among children, but educational facilities are taking no chances. Strict social distancing rules are followed in classrooms, corridors and on the playing field since children were allowed back to school. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
COVID-19 social distancing signs mark the corridors at Johannesburg's Summerwood Primary School. There's little time to play or chatter with friends in the morning. Children are filed quickly into their classrooms to start their day.
We've been forced to keep kids as quiet as possible, keep them disciplined, keep them organized. But now we're slowly moving back into a little bit of play and excitement. And I think the kids really need it. They need to start feeling human again.
Grades are split and follow bi-weekly schedules. Class sizes have been trimmed to 20, and children are not allowed to interact or share books, pens or lunches.
In the classrooms, we try and put them at one table, and each child has their own table. My class is smaller, so I've tried to arrange it in a comfortable way for the children. When they line up, they know that there's social distancing, they know the rules, and that makes it a lot easier.
Break times too are less exciting. The focus has been on keeping children virus-free, while teachers keep a careful watch.
I think there's a switch in the mind that gets tripped. It's lunchtime, I need to run and play. So it is a little bit more challenging to manage and control the children at break. But having said that, we've overcome that by creating different areas for different groups to have their break, and we've staggered the break times.
When their masks are off, they're not allowed to socialize. They can eat their lunch, and then afterwards they can do whatever they want. So some of them will want to do running races, for example, or they'll want to play with a ball. As long as there's social distancing and as long as we sanitize and as long as they keep their masks on.
These children have settled well into their new routine. The challenge is now getting through the last few weeks of the school year and preparing them for 2021. Julie Shire, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
In Somalia, Parliament has legalized a 30% quota for women in both houses. The move comes after years of campaigning by rights groups who lobbied for more women in political positions. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bilo reports from Mogadishu.
In June, lawmakers unanimously endorsed a major legislation that will now see women in Somalia receive 30% representation in the upcoming federal parliament. The move, seen as a major victory for women in the country, comes as Somalia gears up for general elections. Lawmakers, senators and a new president will be elected in the coming months.
30% quota for women must be guaranteed. Women contesting for these seats must be qualified and seen as equal to men representing their respective constituencies in parliament.
Currently, women make up 24% of lawmakers in both houses of parliament. Fawzia Haji Adam, who once became the first woman to become a deputy prime minister in Somalia, wants the constitution amended to ensure each region reserves seats specifically for women.
In order to ensure women receive their share, I propose each of the country's 18 regions to reserve 2 seats for women representatives in the lower house. This will in turn increase the number of women in parliament to 36%.
Several clans have openly opposed women from representing them both in parliament and in the Senate. And with the absence of a popular vote, many women have been forced to go the extra mile in convincing clan elders that they can be trusted in making critical decisions.
For years, men have dominated politics in this country. As women, we are not seeking only representation in parliament. We want the same level of representation in the cabinet, in local administrations, as well as in all state institutions.
Meanwhile, leaders have again failed to agree on ways to end decades-long clan-based political representation known as 4.5 that involves 4 major and minority clans. Until that is abolished, experts say marginalized sectors of the society, including women and the youth, will continue to face serious hurdles whenever they seek elective posts. Abdul Aziz Bilon, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Look now at some of our top stories at this hour. Alleged Rwandan genocide financier Felicien Kabuga is to be temporarily transferred to The Hague for a medical assessment. That's according to the UN tribunal in charge of his case. Kabuga's lawyers had asked that he be transferred to The Hague instead of Arusha in Tanzania, saying long-haul air travel would pose a health risk to the 85-year-old businessman because of the COVID-19 pandemic. In Nigeria, the governor of Lagos has said authorities are investigating the death of one person who suffered blunt trauma to the head during anti-police protests on Tuesday. At least 25 people were wounded. Some protesters have broken a curfew imposed on Tuesday after soldiers were accused of opening fire on Nigerians protesting against police brutality in Lagos. And Burundi's ex-president Pierre Buyoya said Wednesday that he rejected a life sentence he received in absentia this week. He was sentenced over the 1993 assassination of his successor. Buyoya is dismissing the case as politically motivated. According to a court ruling, Buyoya was convicted for an attack against a then head of state, President Melchior Ndadaye. Those are some of our top stories at this hour. It's time now to catch up with the latest in business, and for that we cross over to Uche.
Thanks, Penina. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Egypt is set to build its $29 billion nuclear power plant come 2021. And streaming giant Netflix is on a mission to broadcast more African-made content as well as work with telecom operators.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
And let's start off in Egypt. Construction of the country's first nuclear plant is set to begin in the second half of 2021. The announcement comes after authorities there secured a permit for the power plant with a capacity of 4,800 megawatts. It will be built by Russian State Nuclear Corporation, Rosatom, at a cost of about $29 billion US. Well, from Cairo, here is Yasser Hakim with more details.
Site preparatory work have begun at the Al Dab'a nuclear plant that is expected to be delivered in 2028-2029. The nuclear energy plant that's being constructed on the shores of the Mediterranean is a long-awaited project that could elevate Egypt's position in the renewable energy sector. Once it's switched on, the 4-reactor facility would produce 4.8 gigawatts of electricity for one of Africa's leading economies.
The energy produced from the reactor will account for 7 to 8% of total energy produced by Egypt. It's important we diversify our sources of energy: hydro, wind, solar and nuclear. Many sectors will benefit from the output, like agriculture and industrial sectors. It's worth noting that the price of electricity from the nuclear plant will be 70% cheaper than conventionally produced electricity. Higher supply with lower prices will benefit local consumers and businesses. It will also enable exports that will create hard currency revenues.
According to the chairman of Rosatom, a Russian company that's building the reactor, the Al-Dab'a nuclear power plant is expected to generate returns worth 4 times the amount spent on its construction. Several leading Egyptian companies are also working at the site, which is located 184 kilometers west of Alexandria.
According to the contract signed with Russia, the Egyptian components in the reactor would be 20% in the first phase and will increase in the following stages. We've seen 3 Egyptian companies are involved in the construction now, and more will take part as there are 5 tenders till the end of the year. In construction, equipment supply, technology services, and more.
Egyptian scientists will also get the proper training to work at the plant when it's finally inaugurated. Cairo wants to make use of the technology transfer and the experience it will gain from building this project by establishing smaller reactors in the future, and even send scientists to African nations to establish similar projects. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Now, the market for commercial real estate has tanked globally as COVID-19 depresses incomes, while Kampala in Uganda is no different. Players, however, see the situation as only temporary, as CGTN's Michael Baleke now reports.
New housing projects in Kampala are still going up, but official figures show that prices have fallen by over 10%. According to Uganda's Bureau of Statistics, the drop has been driven by the COVID-19 pandemic.
Most people come from abroad and buy houses here and there, but of course there were no travels, and some of the services weren't operating, and those are some of the factors that could have caused that drop.
The Bureau of Statistics says that before the pandemic struck, prices had been steady or moving upwards. Real estate analysts say the lockdown measures to control the spread of the virus meant job losses, in turn affecting incomes.
We're now beginning to get a sense of pressure on people in various ways. People are cutting on their space requirements, people are cutting on the quality of their tenancies, people also are cutting a lot on how they lived before. So luxuries are being dropped and people are only paying attention to the basics.
Uganda's real estate sector is heavily debt dependent, and there is a chain reaction. The fall in the price of property will have an impact on the profits of the developers and subsequently their ability to pay back loans.
There is a projection that non-performing loans will increase from 4.5% to 10%. So obviously, eventually that is bound to have a consequence or an impact on the pricing of financing.
The pandemic has also reduced the cost of land, which has attracted several developers to set up new projects. Some property developers say if the prices continue to fall and the situation drags on for months, they will hold and delay the listing of their properties for sale in anticipation of future price increases. Uganda has a housing deficit of 2.1 million units, and real estate agents say Kampala carries the bulk of that burden, making it still attractive for developers to set up new properties.
Real estate is long term. Yeah, it's long term. So you talk about investment over 30, 40, 50 years. Yeah. So that means that any short-term, effects or any short-term hindrances would not substantially hold it back. And so for those who know the game and have the muscle, this is a small speed bump. It is not a bridge washed away.
However, the fall in prices of residential properties is also an exciting opportunity for many Ugandans with cash flows to buy at a bargain. Michael Baleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
And still in Uganda, the trading arm of the Toyota Group has invested $4 million in a Ugandan startup called Tugende. Now, the project aims to offer small loans for businessmen in the informal sector and provide financing for customers hoping to purchase Toyota vehicles. CGTN's Cham Gono has that report.
Mark Yahweh, like many young businessmen in the informal sector, has turned to commercial banks in hopes of securing a loan to boost his business. He has not always been successful. This time, however, Yahweh is one of the few who get to access a financing facility from Ugandan company Tugende. He's been making a living by driving someone else's bike for the last 3 years. With a down payment at Tugende, he gets to ride his own bike and can start building his business.
For the terms and conditions, I find them to be favorable because when I go to a private motorcycle owner, he gives me a motorbike to ride on a rent basis. Yet, when I come to Tugende, they give me a motorbike with taxes paid.
Launched in 2012, Tugende offers motorcycle mortgages to riders. But the bikers only receive the logbook after the final payment is made. With banks reluctant to lend money to small or informal businesses in Africa due to the high rate of defaulting, clients like Yahweh have a second option.
They don't have adequate financial access to the banks, traditional banks, and so on. And so because of that problem, let's say, the challenge in the financial access, so those micro SMEs or individual business entrepreneurs have a difficulty to expand their businesses and so on. And then we believe this has to be solved.
After a client takes all of the trainings, they move to a field-based screening where they have to pay a small application fee, and then our team goes and visits them at their place of work and at their home. And we're looking for people who already have business experience.
With an asset base of $30 million, Tugende has handed out about 35,000 bike mortgages so far, a small fraction of the Ugandan market, estimated at 800,000 riders.
What we've realized is that there is an enormous demand for credit for small and medium businesses across Africa, and it's very difficult for them to access credit from most standard banks, and even a lot of technology-led lenders are small loans and very expensive. So the Tugende model is all about helping people own income-generating assets where the cash flow they make from their entrepreneurial activities can pay a loan or a mortgage or a hire purchase lease so that they go from renting to owning in a short period of time.
Payments are made via cell phone mobile money service and other digital platforms. Clients like John Anario say he has been able to expand his transportation business.
I got a car from Tugende of 21 million on lease. I driven it. After driving it, I paid it in cash. I completed the lease of the car, and I came back for the bike which I have now. So what I benefited from Tugende, it's too much.
According to a 2017 report by the International Finance Corporation, the financing gap for micro, small and medium enterprises in sub-Saharan Africa is estimated at $331 billion. Tugende hopes to expand its existing motorcycle mortgages, grow its new motor vehicle financing product, and go to new markets in the region. Chom Hono, CGTN.
Meanwhile, the tech sector is closely watching the U.S. presidential election to anticipate how the next administration will handle the China-U.S. tech ecosystem. Now, the past year has been a rocky one for the sector, especially for those Chinese tech companies who are aiming to drive global innovation. Here's our reporter Mark New explaining.
From 5G mobile leader Huawei to instant messaging and payment platform WeChat to social media phenom TikTok. Each has been hit by restrictions and bans from the Trump administration, disrupting supply chains and sending Chinese tech investment in the U.S. plummeting.
We've seen a reduction of Chinese investment in the United States as a whole in the last several quarters, and it is something that we are looking to the next administration to really address and to rebuild and repair those relationships.
University of San Francisco international marketing professor Stanley Kwong says two-way capital flows between the U.S. and China dropped to a 9-year low.
This year is the worst. Under the past few administration, technology was quite open, right? And maybe the issue is that some people are saying they're way too open, but now it's way too much on the other side.
Facing heavy U.S. government scrutiny, Chinese investment in high-tech areas like artificial intelligence has completely shut down. But Kwong says many small and medium-sized businesses still have hopes of investing in the U.S., but in much lower-tech areas such as auto and machine parts. He believes these companies want a more predictable U.S. president.
Chinese always want stability. They don't sense Trump as somebody who's very stable in decision making. And they start seeing that Biden maybe at least they understood what they need to do with the Obama administration.
The Silicon Valley Leadership Group represents more than 350 U.S. companies, many in the tech sector, including industry leaders like Apple and Facebook.
We're losing economic growth. We're losing access to supply chains. We're losing access to global research partners. And we're exposing Silicon Valley innovation economy companies to potential retribution or retaliation from foreign countries.
Professor Kwong fears that if the next president, whoever that may be, fails to address the crisis, the divide could worsen.
I believe that eventually, if we continue the U.S. same path, that would be basically two, I would say, technology system going on, right? And which is something that the Silicon Valley do not like, because Silicon Valley is so much into trying to grow and so much the whole supply chain.
Kwong says the tension hurts Chinese tech companies too. For example, the U.S. currently bans Chinese tech giant Huawei from getting TSMC semiconductors, which puts their chips several generations behind and delays its 5G products. So in this election, big tech on both sides of the Pacific watch closely, knowing that the future of access and innovation could be on the line. Mark New, CGTN, Sunnyvale, California.
And streaming giant Netflix has embarked on broadcasting more African-made content and working with telecom operators on the continent. This is in a bid to make it easier for potential subscribers in key markets to make payments. The company, which has about 193 million subscribers globally, is keen on expanding in Africa. It is also seeking ways to overcome challenges, including slow and expensive internet and the lack of proper payments infrastructure on the continent. Netflix has also set up unique tools and settings on its platform to allow subscribers to choose their mobile data consumption plans carefully when streaming due to high costs of high-speed internet access in some countries.
The business is excited about Africa, and it's putting every effort behind it. And we are investing very seriously in it. And in terms of our strategy, we've always said that we do believe that great stories come from anywhere and they can be loved everywhere across the world. And it's no different with African stories. And so our plans for the continent, they're similar to our global strategy. We just want to bring the best-in-class content from our local storytellers to our audiences around the world. Because the African continent is very rich in storytelling. We have a great oral storytelling culture, and we enjoy telling amazing stories. We want to tell amazing stories in different languages. People have different tastes. We just want to cater for this different people, both in Africa and around the world.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but still to come on Global Business Africa, the Sudanese government calls for an urgent adjustment of its exchange rate, and that's after the U.S. signals to remove the country from its list of state sponsors of terrorism. All that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to Penina.
Thank you, Uche. You're watching Africa Live, still ahead. Egypt promises tourists more interesting visits to the pyramids of Giza as renovations begin in the plateau. Egyptian officials, businessmen and ambassadors from 40 countries have been attending the opening ceremony for the first phase of the Pyramids Plateau renovation. The project will redesign the entire experience of visiting the Great Pyramids of Giza. When completed next year, it will offer a wide variety of restaurants and gift shops inside the pyramids area. The project is promising better services at the ancient wonders to let visitors enjoy much longer stays at the royal tombs. Here's Adel Mahri with more.
The Great Pyramids of Giza are the prime attraction in Egypt. But for decades, tour operators limited the duration of visits before tourists ask for food or the toilet. The Nine Pyramids Lounge is a first at this unique site, where visitors can rest and recharge.
Hospitality is not our job, it's not our strength. How to host the tourists and make them live through a unique experience. This is what makes tourists return. Since I took office, we have decided to outsource these services.
This ceremony inaugurates the Pyramids Plateau project. It's the first cooperation between the private sector and the Antiquities Authority to modernize services provided at Egypt's tourist sites. When the project is completed in 2021, visitors will be able to enjoy an eco-friendly hop-on hop-off bus tour which connects a revamped visitors center with the new Grand Egyptian Museum and the pyramids.
We started by removing all the transportation, but we have actually a Chinese bus. So the first bus that arrived to this historical place is a Chinese bus. Excellent quality, excellent in everything. The bus is fully has Wi-Fi, has cameras all over, has screens. It has a special entry for wheelchairs and everything. So that's only a part. The second part is modernizing all the stops.
Egyptian billionaire Naguib Sawiris' Orascom Pyramids Entertainment has exclusive rights to manage the pyramids visitor services for 15 years. The company's investments here are so far announced to be nearly $25 million.
The electric bus is a big budget, but it's not everything. We are now revamping the old engineering building to make it a complex of restaurants. This by itself, just to make the exterior revamp, it is costing us 70 million EGP. There is a percentage and a minimum guarantee from the profit sharing. Okay, so there is definitely a big share that will go to the government. So it's win-win for both of us.
Pyramids entry tickets, camel rides and other tours will be available to book and pay online. So say bye-bye to getting on top of a camel and being charged extra money to get down. The government is hoping that improving destination management, as in the Pyramids of Giza, will help revitalize Egypt's tourism industry. By eliminating the self-imposed vendors and the bargaining, this project will make the visit to the pyramids much more enjoyable, and more importantly, it will make it more profitable for the state and the managing company. Adel Mahri, CGTN, Cairo.
And in sports, Zamalek agreed to postponement of CAF Champions League second leg semi-final.